We begin today's newscast with crushing news that the IDF finally announces the names of 2 soldiers who were killed on Friday, bringing the total number of deaths to 4 from this one incident in Gaza. Meanwhile, over the weekend, a special IDF operation managed to recover the body of a murdered hostage. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The IDF has now identified the 4 soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip on Friday. They are Sergeant First Class Tom Rothstein, 23, from Ramat Gan, and Staff Sergeant Uri Cohen, age 20, from Neve Iraq. Earlier named were Sergeant Major Chen Gross, 33, from Gan Yoshia, and Staff Sergeant Yoav Raver, 19, from Stay Warburg. The fallen were killed in an explosion in a building they had entered to clear it of potential terror infrastructure, including tunnels. 5 other soldiers were wounded in the incident. Over the weekend, the IDF found the body of Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar in Khan Yunis, killed in a Gaza airstrike last month. The army operated near the European hospital in Khan Yunis and located the bodies of several terrorist operatives buried under the rubble. The Israel-backed and U.S.-run Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is due to open a new aid distribution center today in Gaza City. Earlier, the GHF paused operations in its other centers due to threats against the group by Hamas. They issued a statement saying Gazans are hungry because Hamas made direct threats against GHF operations. At Israel's request, the U.S. is reportedly considering giving $500 million to the GHF operations. Sources say that Israel asked for the funds to underwrite the aid initiative for 180 days. Over the weekend, Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed that Israel is arming clans in Gaza that are against Hamas. The clan Militia in South Gaza is led by Yasser Abu Shabab, who presented himself as an opposition force to Hamas that aims to protect trucks bringing aid into Gaza under the GHF.
בצד גורמי הביטחון, אנחנו הפעלנו חמולות בעזה שמתנגדות לחמאס. מה רע בזה? זה רק טוב. רק מציל חיים של חיילי צה"ל. והפרסום של זה עושה טוב רק לחמאס.
The IDF has reportedly given weapons to the militia that were seized from Hamas during the war. The militia is operating only in areas in Gaza under full IDF control.
Thank you, Steve, for that report. And the Israeli government has not officially confirmed working with Yasser Abu Shabab, but sources tell ILTV's partner Ynet Israel's strategy to work with him is real, calculated, and can even save lives. Abu Shabab is a 32-year-old Rafah native who is of Bedouin descent and actually escaped a Hamas prison when Israeli airstrikes hit the terror group's security headquarters during the war. He announced the creation of a new force to take down Hamas, all while protecting civilians from the terror group and promising Gazans food and shelter. His popularity continues to grow amongst the population, threatening the 20-year chokehold Hamas has had on its own people. Today, Abu Shabab denied working with the Israelis on Israel's army radio and said in this exclusive interview with the Center for Peace Communications, he's hoping to expand into other Hamas-controlled areas and is calling on international communities for support.
شعبنا الفلسطيني بيان من القوات الشعبية الفلسطينية. نحن لم ولن نعمل مع الاحتلال وهدفنا هو حماية حقوق الإنسان الفلسطيني من الإرهاب حماس بخصوص ما ذكر عن أسلحتنا البدائية التي تحمي أبناء شعبنا. تورثناها عن قبيلة الطرابين والقبائل والعائلات الفلسطينية. اليوم لا يمكننا سوى التركيز على هدفنا وهو حماية أبناء شعبنا من إرهاب حماس وسيطرتها الغير مقبولة على الناس ويجب تنحيها عن الحكم. خاصة بعد خروج مئات المظاهرات التي تطالبها بالرحيل.
And the leader of the small Gaza terror group, Mujahideen Brigades, was killed in an Israeli airstrike, the military confirms. His elimination brings a close to deep tragedy for Israeli families, as the IDF says he was responsible for the murders and abductions of Shiri Bibas and her 2 children, Ariel and Kafir, Americans Judy Weinstein and Gadi Chagai, and a Thai hostage, Pinta Netapong. Here's what else you need to know. In a joint IDF and Shin Bet operation, the military says Assad Abu Sharia, the head of the terror group Mujahideen Brigades, was killed in an airstrike in Gaza City nearly 20 months after invading Kibbutz Nir Oz and abducting and murdering Israelis and foreign nationals. One of the leaders of the massacre in Nir Oz on October 7th, the IDF says Sharia was directly involved in the abduction and murder of Shiri, Ariel, and Kafir Bibas, who the IDF has previously described as being murdered in November of 2023, quote, in cold blood with bare hands. The Bibas family issued a statement saying the elimination, quote, marks another step in our journey towards closure and accepting the tremendous loss of Shiri, Ariel, and Kafir, and thanking the IDF soldiers and security forces for their unwavering commitment. The IDF says Sharia was also responsible for the abduction of the bodies of American hostages Judy Weinstein and Gadi Chagai, who were recovered last week in a special operation. Their bodies were in the hands of the brigades after being murdered and then abducted from Kibbutz Nir Oz. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the body of a Thai hostage was also recovered in a special operation deep in Rafah. Kidnapped alive from Kibbutz Nir Oz, where he was a farmer, the IDF says Sharia is also responsible for his abduction and murder while in captivity. The IDF says the Mujahideen Brigades was unaware of Hamas's plans on October 7th, but acted as an extension and utilized their terrorist framework during the attack. They say the terror group is now holding the body of another foreign national. And fears continue to grow for the remaining living hostages after Hamas published a new threat on hostage Matan Zain-Kauker, releasing this image of him on Sunday. Hamas's spokesperson claims the IDF is operating where Zain-Kauker is being held and that its operations are endangering his life. Reports say the IDF does not have a current operation attempting to rescue him. And it was a busy weekend with big developments that unfolded, with news on a militia group that is allegedly being armed by Israel to challenge Hamas's terror rule in Gaza, and the recovery of a hostage in Rafah. Let's discuss all of it. Here to help us out today is Jonathan Conricus, former IDF spokesperson and a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Shalom.
We first got official confirmation about this Gaza militia group Israel has been arming to combat and challenge Hamas rule in Gaza just late last week. But the head of the clan, Abu Shabab, is finally starting to speak out about this now, denying reports he's actually working with the Israelis. Tell us what you know about this group. How can a group like this be beneficial to Israel and possibly challenge Hamas?
Well, you know, in war, the use of proxy organizations and basically supporting the enemies of your enemy is not a new or original Israeli practice. That it has been done by many warring sides throughout history. So we're not seeing something unique. CIA, KGB, the French, the Brits have all been using the same practices and the same tactics. I think it's important to mention, and the Russians as well, I think it's important to mention that it's not always a successful endeavor. There are many examples in history of where this hasn't achieved the goals that they were trying to achieve. So I'm cautious and skeptic about how successful it will be. I do agree, however, with the Prime Minister that the supreme goal is to dismantle Hamas, to defeat Hamas, and arming and helping other organizations in Gaza to fight Hamas is a positive thing. Now, I understand that this group is now under domestic Palestinian pressure because nobody in Gaza wants to be perceived as if they're acting at the behest of Israel. That's a very dangerous thing. That's not good for domestic policies, and I'm sure that's why we're seeing now the latest statements. And I'm also reading reports from credible Israeli sources that Shabab, Ali Shabab, has strong ties with the Palestinian Authority, documented ties with intelligence officials at the Palestinian Authority. So it's a complex picture, but that is really very much what war is. You work in the shadows, you work out in the open. Sometimes it works and achieves what you want. Sometimes it doesn't. We'll have to be patient and see if this new little Palestinian militia will do good for Israel and for Gazan civilians.
Right. There's a lot of complexities to this. How long do you think Israel has been actually arming a group like this, and what do you think the overall objective is? You mentioned some ties with the PA there, but could Israel possibly be seeing them as a group that could be in power someday, or could this somehow blow up in Israel's face?
No, I think we have to look at this in the right proportions. We're talking about a very small and local group that is, as your report said, is affiliated with Bedouins and of Bedouin heritage, that in itself is a limiting factor in terms of achieving more than local control in any Gaza environment, because the Bedouins are a small minority. They are not the dominant tribes and the dominant families, not in the south and not in the center and not in Gaza City. So I think this is much more of a local endeavor. I wouldn't be surprised if there are other efforts that are being undertaken by Israeli security forces in central and northern parts of Gaza. That would make sense. And basically what Israel is doing, if we zoom out and look at this strategically, what Israel is doing is trying to apply pressure on Hamas on all fronts. There's limited military pressure, not all out and not massive yet. There is humanitarian pressure, which Israel is applying by introducing this new mechanism that provides food to Gazans without the food going through the hands of Hamas and the UN, which in this case are part and parcel of the same thing, the Hamas and the UN. And that's additional pressure on Hamas's ability to continue to govern over the Gaza Strip. And we now see that Israel is also trying to bring about armed opposition against Hamas. And there's a very good reason to do that. Today, we also saw videos of a public execution, penal measures that Hamas thugs executed a Palestinian in plain sight in Gaza, in southern Gaza, for defying the orders of Hamas or for otherwise not being a disciplined citizen. And we could see the very brutal execution by Hamas. And that's why it's so important to have anywhere there's any possibility to undermine the strength and the governance of Hamas. That's definitely a claim, and that's something that Israel needs to be doing.
Thank you so much for your perspective on all this as these developments continue to change throughout the days. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
The United States has taken aim at the International Criminal Court, sanctioning judges over what it calls a dangerous abuse of power. More on this from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The United States has slapped sanctions on 4 international criminal court judges in a rare and forceful response to recent investigations targeting both American personnel and Israeli leaders. Announced Thursday by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the sanctions mark the first time Washington has directly penalized judges from the independent tribunal in The Hague. The 4 named judges have actively engaged in the ICC's illegitimate and baseless actions targeting America or our closest ally Israel, Rubio said in a statement, accusing the court of overreach and politicization. He added, quote, "The United States will take whatever actions we deem necessary to protect our sovereignty and that of Israel." The judges are being sanctioned for greenlighting investigations into alleged U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan and authorizing arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over actions during the war in Gaza. The ICC quickly condemned the move. In an interview with Israel's JNS, it said it, quote, deplores the sanctions, calling them a clear attempt to undermine the independence of the court. European leaders also pushed back, with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen writing that the ICC, quote, must be free to act without pressure. The 4 judges are now designated as specially sanctioned individuals, meaning any U.S.-based assets are frozen and international banking access severely restricted. While the Trump administration previously targeted ICC prosecutors, the judges being sanctioned marks a dramatic escalation in the U.S. ICC standoff over accountability, sovereignty, and international justice.
France condemned recent Israeli airstrikes in Beirut and said they were in violation of the November 2024 ceasefire. Over the weekend, the IDF struck underground Hezbollah drone factories in Beirut. The attacks came after what Israel called the blatant violation of November's ceasefire while preparing for future war. The statement from Paris said there is a monitoring mechanism in place established by the ceasefire agreement, and the dismantling of unauthorized military sites is a priority for the Lebanese armed forces. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Lebanon says their army has dismantled 500 Hezbollah sites. Now, the strikes were carried out on several buildings in Beirut's southern suburb after a warning was issued to evacuate those buildings. Now, the army said it hit buildings used by Hezbollah to manufacture drones by Hezbollah forces known as Unit 127. The army identified the unit was working to produce thousands of UAVs under the guidance and funding of Iranian terror officials. And a new report says materials for producing ballistic missiles Iran ordered from China is expected to arrive within the coming months. The new report says the shipment for the materials was agreed likely before President Trump's announcement for proposed nuclear talks with the supreme leader of Iran. The materials ordered, according to the report, said that Tehran ordered enough to potentially create up to 800 ballistic missiles. The reporting suggests that Iran is working to reestablish itself and its proxy terror network in the Middle East militarily. And the IDF is now being instructed to intercept Greta Thunberg's Freedom Flotilla from reaching the Gaza Strip. Defense Minister Israel Katz called Thunberg and others on the boat anti-Semitic and that no one will violate the blockade as it's designed to prevent the transfer of weapons to Hamas. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The so-called Gaza Freedom Flotilla carries only a small amount of aid, but brings a potential PR problem for Israel. If not stopped along the way, the 12 pro-Palestinian activists, including Greta Thunberg, say they will reach the Gaza coast and confront the IDF while broadcasting live to the world. The flotilla left Sicily on June 1st. It claims to have sailed past Egypt and expect to reach the Gaza shores tomorrow. They could be intercepted as soon as they reach Israeli international waters. The small ship presents itself as a humanitarian mission carrying essential supplies, but reports suggest that several on board promote a radical anti-Western ideology, support terror groups, and advocate for the elimination of Israel.
The story here is not that we are sailing to Gaza. The story is here that Israel is having a siege on Gaza and that Israel has been oppressing people for decades and decades and are committing ethnic cleansing, genocide, ecocide, and all kinds of war crimes. That is the story here. So keep your eyes on Gaza, but also keep your eyes on deck here because visibility means safety.
Thunberg rose to fame as an environmental activist. She has yet to condemn the Hamas-led massacre on October 7th, nor has she acknowledged the victims and hostages taken during the attack.
And joining us now to discuss is Seth Fransman, senior contributing editor at the Jerusalem Post. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I think what everyone is wondering right now is what are these pro-Palestinian activists planning to do? We now know that Defense Minister Katz is now informing the IDF to intercept this ship before it even reaches Gaza. What does this likely mean militarily?
Well, it's not that big a sailboat, I think, and it has, 12 people or so on it, maybe a few more. It should be a pretty easy task for the Navy to go out there and either order them to divert to some other location. They're not that far from Egypt. I think they're about 40 or 50 kilometers from Egypt off the coast. So they could divert to Egypt or they can go to Cyprus. And if necessary, I guess their boat can be towed somewhere, like what happened with the Mavi Marmara, back in 2011 or so. That cruise ship of 600 people was towed to Ashdod. That was not an easy operation, but this is just a much smaller and should be much smaller and easier.
Yeah, I think another thing people are wondering is what were these pro-Palestinians? What were they trying to accomplish? What were they planning on doing in Gaza? I guess if they could have stepped foot inside of the enclave.
I mean, it looks like just a publicity stunt. It's not that big a boat. It can't carry very much aid. It's just symbolic that if they could get there and they could make a video on the coast and say, look, we broke this blockade, we brought you, 50 sandwiches, and this is just amazing. I just think it's either publicity or you could say it's just symbolic. In their view, it's a symbolic effort, and they would think that would then encourage the world to focus more on Gaza, and because they brought along a few people that have a following like Greta, so then they think that all these people that were interested in other causes will revert to that.
Yeah, and the ship was carrying activists who have refused to condemn Hamas and its attacks on Israelis And I want to note, and on Palestinians, pretty much failing to understand the truth of what is actually happening inside on the ground in Gaza. How often are we seeing misinformation like this being consumed by these so-called activists around the world? There is a huge misinformation campaign we've seen.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, parts of it is misinformation, that they themselves, you know, either are involved in making the misinformation or they just purposely want to be deceived. But there's another aspect to it, which is that these people, some of them, you know, have latched onto this as the new thing, the new cause célèbre. They think that they're at the forefront of human rights activism. They think, you know, this is the new apartheid, so that their parents, you know, protested apartheid, or their parents protested for civil rights in the United States in the 60s or 70s. So, you know, they feel that they're part of that long history. And I think, you know, so they view themselves that way, and therefore they don't see the Israeli victims, or they create justifications for why it's okay to kill Israelis. They say, well, this is resistance, you know, we have a right to resist. It's armed resistance against civilians, and it's acceptable. And they create that apartheid narrative in order to justify that, because then you can say, well, all Israelis are somehow guilty, or all of them go to the army. So it's partly misinformation, but I think it's partly just their desire to latch on to what they think is a popular cause and the latest trend, and then they'll move on to something else in the next few years.
Thank you so much for your perspective and joining us. I think people around the world will be watching to see how this will be handled tomorrow.
Thank you.
And now for a positive story to wrap up our newscast. Israeli doctors just celebrated the first and second successful artificial heart transplants. 2 patients who received this life-saving procedure are recovering well in a development that boosts Israeli healthcare capabilities. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
In an incredible medical achievement and the first of its kind, Israeli doctors at Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital in Jerusalem successfully completed an artificial heart transplant. Following the rigorous 7-hour procedure, just 4 days later, Sheba Medical Center in Tel Aviv announced that their team, too, have completed this life-saving procedure. The male patients, one in his 50s and one in his 60s, are making an incredible post-op recovery, according to staff. This special artificial heart is constructed of titanium and wrapped with membranes derived from cow heart tissue, a feature meant to reduce the risk of blood clots. This development is set to revolutionize Israel's healthcare landscape, as according to the World Health Organization, cardiovascular diseases and heart failure are the #1 cause of death among adults, and functioning healthy hearts for transplant are not an accessible commodity. With the first successful transplant procedure of a fully human-made heart, patients with chronic cardiovascular issues have more options, and the death rate should decrease.
Interesting report. Thanks so much, Devo. And let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 21 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 31 degrees Celsius or 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all of your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Shosh Bedrosian. Thanks so much for watching.